Okay, this is the audience. We've got 6 people. Okay. Alright, so we all know a little bit about the female reproductive cycle, or at least we know about periods. We know that periods happen once a month. We know that they come when a woman's not pregnant. We know that it's bleeding for about 5 days. We know that there's cramping. We know that there's emotional changes and back pain. But do we really know what's going on inside the body when the female reproductive cycle is happening? The female reproductive cycle, it actually has 2 different cycles. There's the ovarian cycle and the endometrial cycle, and they happen at the exact same time. And the cycle lasts 28 days on average. Some people's are actually more like 30, or some people's are like 24, but the average is 28. So it's every day of a female's life she's in her reproductive cycle. The ovarian phase has 3 different phases. There's the follicular phase, the luteal phase, and in between that is the ovulation. And then the endometrial cycle has the proliferative phase, the secretory phase, the ischemic phase, and menstruation, which is the actual period. So it starts off mid-menstrual cycle when the brain realizes there's low hormones. In the menstrual cycle, all the hormones have dropped off. So then the hypothalamus tells the posterior lobe to start sending FSH, and the ovaries get it. And FSH does exactly like the name says. It's a follicle stimulating hormone. Our ovaries don't have eggs in them, they have little follicles in them. And the FSH starts stimulating about 4 to 6 follicles. When those follicles get stimulated, that's when the ovary starts secreting estrogen. And estrogen goes to the lining in the uterus, which is the endometrial lining, and it goes to the brain. The estrogen starts trying to make the follicles swell up. And usually there's only about 1 follicle that actually swells up big enough to kickstart some things. So it'll just start to get bigger and bigger. And when estrogen peaks, it tells the hypothalamus, I don't need any more follicle stimulating hormones. So then, since it's not sending FSH anymore, it starts sending a different hormone, and that is LH. And LH is the luteinizing hormone, which starts the luteal phase. And before all that, the estrogen is doing its work in the lining here and starting to make it real nice and fluffy and opening up the vessels for blood to get there and making it nice for the egg to eventually get in there and burrow in. Well, LH, when it comes through, it causes the follicle to rupture. And when it ruptures, it releases the ovum, which is the egg. And the egg starts to go through the fallopian tubes. And it stays in the fallopian tubes for about 72 hours. And that is called ovulation, when the egg is in the fallopian tubes just waiting for the right one. And it's actually the same amount of time that sperm lives, 72 hours. So when the follicle ruptures, it causes it becomes a cyst, and it's called the corpus luteum cyst. That produces progesterone, and progesterone also goes to the endometrial lining. So you have estrogen and progesterone go into the lining, and it's just starting the secretory phase, and that is when the tissues is just absorbing all the hormones and just giving it the last finishing touches for the egg to burrow into. The egg, if is fertilized, as soon as the nucleus of the egg and the nucleus of the sperm connect, starts sending off a hormone back to the cyst, and it's called HCG. HCG is the hormone that actually shows up on pregnancy tests, because the only way that hormone can happen is if the egg and the sperm connect. And it tells the corpus luteal cyst to stay alive. We're going to need the progesterone a little longer. And eventually it'll die off, and then the placenta will take over progesterone production. But if you don't get pregnant, then no HCG gets sent, the corpus luteal cyst starts to die off, the egg comes down, and it starts the ischemic phase. And the ischemic phase is from all the estrogen and progesterone dying off, so those vessels start to close off. So all of this starts to close off, and the tiny arteries in the tissue start to rupture, which releases bleeding, and the tissue just starts to slough off, and you start your period. With all that said, you can kind of see how when women go through menopause, they stop having periods, because menopause is when all the follicles have been used up. So your follicles are gone. Your brain has low hormones. It sends FSH, but there's no follicles to stimulate to activate estrogen to do everything else. So all the hormones are just gone. And in the ischemic phase, all that vessels dying off, that causes all the cramping and back pain that women go through. And that's the female reproductive cycle. Thank you.